WNOC Bowling Green, Toledo, WHRQ Sandusky, WRRO Eden Bryan, WFOT Lexington, Mansfield, and WSHB Willard.
Welcome to Annunciation Radio's Faith with Reasons, the program that examines what the church teaches and why. Faith with Reasons.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Wednesday. Ron Finn and Shayne Stanfield with Faith with Reasons. And whether you're listening on any one of our 5 Annunciation Radio network of stations, family of stations, we hope you are greeted by the same sunshine we are here in our Toledo studios. Such a beautiful day, a far cry from last night. I mean, we had, 80s yesterday. We barely cracked 60 today, so a lot cooler. But the sunshine is nice. And some rough weather for a lot of folks around last evening. We just got showers, but Shayne, you got the brunt of the storm.
Sounds like we got the brunt of it. Yeah, it spent a good part of the day doing storm cleanup. As I told you earlier, it took the top of one of the 2 trees in front of our home right off. So it was it was chainsaw. I always enjoyed the chainsaw, so it was my opportunity to get that out.
Don't get to use it too often. Yeah.
No, that's for sure. But
Halloween and storms. That's about it.
Just thankful, that it didn't damage the house and it didn't land on one of the neighbors' cars. Got pretty close. So
yeah, and they were somewhat isolated and fast moving and changing in direction. It was kind of an unpredictable system. I know the Cleveland Guardians game was postponed at the beginning. They had a rain delay, but they didn't see rain until 2 hours after that. So they could have got most of the game in. But anyway, hopefully everybody is fine after last night's storms. We'll just wait for the next one, right?
Absolutely.
We are very pleased to have Dr. Peter Kreeft with us on Faith with Reasons today. And I'll tell you what, when you've got over 100 books under your belt, you get the sense that he is a very prolific writer. And, of course, you've probably read a number of Peter's books, because he's written on so many different things. He is a professor of philosophy at Boston College, one of the most respected and prolific Christian authors of our time, and that's an understatement. His books cover a wide array of topics. He covers spirituality, theology, philosophy, and they include Doors in the Walls of the World, The Greatest Philosopher Who Ever Lived, How to Be Holy, Because God is Real, You Can Understand the Bible, and Summa of the Summa. And he's got 2 new books that came out pretty much simultaneously from Annunciation Press. From Calvinist to Catholic and The Mystery of Joy are now available from Ignatius.com. And Dr. Peter Kreeft, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Faith with Reasons.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction I cannot possibly live up to.
I don't know about that. I think that was the short version. You got a lot to your credit there.
No, the shortest version is 1 or 2 words, like the old Johnny Carson. Here's Johnny.
Here's Peter. Well, we're glad to have you on. And I'll tell you what, the books that we just mentioned, great reads, as all your books are. And I would really challenge any Catholic out there, if you don't have a book on your bookshelf, or 2 or 5 from Dr. Peter Kreeft, you're seriously lacking in your literary endeavors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say I enjoyed Summa of the Summa. I do have that on my bookshelf. It's the easier version, obviously, the Summa.
Yeah, that's true. That's kind of hard to read.
I still struggled through it, so
it's not 4,000 pages long.
No. But no, thank you for that. It's a great work.
And
it isn't, but thank you for saying so.
And you do have that unique talent, that gift to write in such a way that it's not above our heads. We can get on your page, so to speak, and really follow along, and that really draws us deeper into the subject matter at hand. So we appreciate what you're doing there. Now, I want to talk about both these books, but I kind of want to start with the autobiography, From Calvinist to Catholic, where you're telling readers your own story, all of the people, the ideas that kind of led you to the Catholic Church as a young man. And, quite a journey, really. Can you maybe tell us about that journey a little bit, and then what kind of led you to write this book now, after all these years?
Every journey is interesting, especially spiritual journeys.
Mm-hmm.
I resisted writing that book because I think autobiographies are usually self-indulgent, like diaries. And Mark Brumley, the head of Ignatius Press, kept at me, and he finally persuaded me by saying, well, C.S. Lewis wrote an autobiography too, Surprised by Joy, and he too hates autobiographies, so why don't you follow in his footsteps? I said, well, I tried to follow those footsteps in other ways, so okay, I'll try it.
Mark Brumley's a pretty smart guy, yeah.
He is indeed.
Well done. Now, right from the introduction, you really didn't want to write the book, and I don't know how long he kept after you to do that. And I certainly get that reasoning behind holding off on doing that. But it certainly doesn't come off as self-indulgent in any way. It's just a good read.
No, it's not. It's not so much about me as about my journey and about the truth.
Yeah, and so many people can relate to it too, because as you say, every conversion story is a journey, and it's a tale worth telling. I know Shayne has come into the church really just not too distant past.
Yep, 12
and
years
your
ago.
journey would be different than anybody else's.
Yeah.
So it's always good to hear about these and kind of find some common ground. You're going to find some people that connect with it and really have gone through a similar path.
Well, it's a form of apologetics, which I think is more effective than abstract argument.
Yes.
Both the Old Testament and the New Testament are divided into three sections. The first section, the most important one, is the historical books, what actually happened in history. And that's what fundamentally brought me into the Catholic Church. It's historically the product of Christ himself and the apostles.
May I ask how was that very close to the time that you actually converted, or were you resisting? Did you have knowledge of this and held off? Because if I understand, it was sometime right around 1960 when you made it official.
Well, there's always resistance.
Sure.
A journey is almost by definition a kind of spiritual warfare, an adventure. And I didn't want to become a Catholic. I had no Catholic friends, and I had been taught that Catholicism was very dangerous and idolatrous and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I gradually became more in love with things Catholic, and I thought it was a temptation. So I think the turning point was a course I took in church history at Calvin College, and the professor, who was an old, wise Calvinist theologian and pastor, began by saying, this is a course in church history. What's the difference between our view of that and the Catholic view? Nobody had an answer. So he drew two pictures on the board. I remember these pictures very vividly. One was an acorn and an oak tree, and the other was Noah's Ark with barnacles on the bottom. And he explained that the Catholic view was that the church that we see today in the world, the Catholic Church, the universal church, is the same church that Jesus founded, only it's much bigger. It may not look like the New Testament church, as an oak tree doesn't look like an acorn, but that's the same thing, just as a baby is the same person as an adult. Whereas our view, the Reformed view, is that the church got worse and worse, more and more pagan, more and more corrupt, until finally, late in the Middle Ages, Luther and Calvin said, hey, the ark is sinking unless we scrape off those foreign barnacles, which are eating away at it. So they restored the primitive church to its purity. So I asked the professor the question, do you mean to say to me that if my Catholic friend and I both entered a time machine and went back to the first century and worshipped in the early apostolic church, that I, as a Protestant, would be much more at home than he as a Catholic? And I remember the professor looking at me in a strange way. He said, that's a very strange way to put it, but yes, that's exactly what I mean. So I said to myself, oh, good. All I have to do is read the church fathers, find out how Protestant they are, and now I know that I'm in the right church.
There you go.
Well, you know the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a two-wheeled segue there. Yeah, absolutely. And as you describe college life, I think, first of all, it's very funny because you talk about some of the pranks and so forth. And, of course, life in Grand Rapids, Michigan at that Calvin College. But learning a lot, not only from the professors who really had no interest in turning you Catholic, right? Probably, how about the camaraderie among the students? I mean, did you bring anybody along with you during this journey at this early stage?
I'm not sure. I know a couple of my friends were very interested in it and almost became Catholic. A couple of them became Anglican. Yeah, camaraderie is one of the best things about a college life. You learn not just from books, but from people and interactions with a lot of different kinds of people. And I didn't feel much fear or anger or resentment on the part of other students. However, there was one incident where I was asked to give a short sermon in chapel. They ask seniors to often do that if they get an A in theology. And I talked about I didn't use the word Catholic, but I said the universality of Christianity, and that if Christ is God incarnate, and if John 1 verse 9 is true, that he enlightens everyone who comes into the world, therefore everyone enlightened by Christ in some way or other has contact with him. And therefore, in some way, even Socrates, who was a martyr for truth, although he was an agnostic about God, was in a sense a Christian. And therefore, Catholic Christians and Protestant Christians are both Christians, even though they have serious theological differences. And many of the administration and faculty, I think, were very skeptical about that. They thought the Catholics were actually not Christians. They were not just heretics and schismatics, but apostates.
I have to ask a question. Basically one professor to another, and I know you've taught for quite some time. Do you have an explanation as to why your college professors, when you're studying this and what you've described here in the book, do you see it today as an intellectual dishonesty? I mean, here you are a student and you've read yourself basically into the Catholic Church. This material was available to them. Did they purposely avoid this sort of thing, or were they aware of it and they twist it in certain ways to conform to their beliefs in this case, Calvinistic understanding of Christianity?
No, I didn't get that impression from almost all of my professors at Calvin College. I respected their integrity and their honesty. They didn't pay much attention to church history, most of them. Mm-hmm. And I guess unconsciously or subconsciously, that was due not just to open-mindedness, but to fear. But I didn't find that at a conscious level. In fact, my favorite professor, William Henry Jellema, who has produced very many philosophy professors like Alvin Plantinga and Nick Walterstorff, I confessed to him once that I was thinking of becoming a Catholic, and he said, let's talk about that privately. And then he confessed to me that he seriously thought about it when he was in college, too. And he eventually didn't, but he was very understanding. And he warned me that the reasons had to be very honest, because there's Catholic ghettos and Protestant ghettos and Catholic fools and Protestant fools, and you'll find both of them there. He was a very wise man, but wonderfully honest.
Yeah, that's perfect. And it reminds us, really, faith is a gift, and whatever your faith tradition is, I mean, that is a gift to you, and we're not too keen on giving up our gifts. I mean, we want to cling to them. We want to hang on to them. As opposed to just finding the next, shiny object. If our we want to imagine that we gave ourselves the gift.
But that notion that faith is a gift of God and not simply something we work up for ourselves is very similar to the most famous, distinctively Calvinist emphasis on predestination. It's a very dangerous thing to say at the wrong time, namely at the beginning. Because if you tell a prospective convert that faith is a gift, he'll say, well, if it's a gift, it's up to God, and I just have to wait around until it's given to me. I can't do anything about it. And that's basically what Calvin said about predestination. It's not at all due to our free will, but simply to God's sovereignty. And that's not true. That's too simple. But after the gift is given, we need to know that it was a gift. that thing that came out of us, that came out of our choice, originated in God, because God's grace and God's omnipotence and God's sovereignty and God's predestination doesn't bypass our responsibility and our free will and our act of faith. It actualizes it. It turns it on rather than off. Grace perfects nature.
So, as far as your experience, now, if I understood you correctly, there was not, I guess, just for a point of clarification, a very anti-Catholic sentiment at the university. And if there was it based in Calvinism itself, or do you think it was more of personal biases that varied from person to person?
I would say some of the professors were very anti-Catholic, and they sincerely believed that Catholicism was a very harmful heresy. Mm-hmm. An equal number of professors were very respectable things Catholic, and their disagreement was not nearly as acidic, but it was based on theological reasons. Calvinists take their theology very seriously, and they're usually very honest about it. With that, sometimes comes the conclusion that Catholicism is very bad. Sometimes there comes with that the conclusion that, well, Catholicism isn't wrong. It is not right, but it's certainly a form of Christianity. So I don't think you can generalize. You find professors on both sides of that divide. But I didn't find any of them that I'd call dishonest. I think there are many more dishonest professors today. They're ideologically in lockstep, and if you say the wrong thing, you're just dismissed as morally insane.
And basically, just to discredit that, I guess, if I can get the word out, because there's generally a lack of an argument. I guess at that point, one would say if they find difficulty in actually being able to defend their own faith. It seems to me.
Yeah. One of the most open-minded, fair, and rational professors I ever had was an atheist at Yale University, Bran Blanchard. His brother, Paul Blanchard, wrote a very nasty book about the Catholic Church wanting to take over America politically. But his brother, Bran, was as rational and as open-minded and as sheerly intelligent a professor as I ever met.
So, as far as the as far as your I guess your progression here, you're in undergraduate school. You're at this Calvin College, and you obviously haven't quite made this the move to move to Catholicism. You went on and went to graduate school. And
yep.
that's where this I guess these thoughts kind of festered. Is that a better way to say it? You're continuing to inch your way closer and closer to joining the church, but the seeds were planted at Calvin College.
Yeah, any journey has steps, and it moves in a certain direction. Put it on a graph, and it's always going to move from left to right, but sometimes it's going to move up and down like a roller coaster. Mm-hmm. So both are true. It's an up and down thing, and it's nevertheless a teleological thing, a purposed thing, a thing with a definite direction. So it became clearer and clearer to me. In fact, the time I definitively decided that I must become a Catholic because it was true was in my senior year at Calvin College.
Oh, okay.
And I was not actually received into the church until a year later at Yale.
Our guest is Dr. Peter Kreeft, and we're talking about two books. Well, we're talking about one right now, but we're going to get to the other one as well. From Calvinist to Catholic, and the other book is The Mystery of Joy. And before, Dr. Kreeft, we move on to joy, I do want to ask about one of the chapters in your book. I'm not going to ask you to reference each page and so forth, but I love the chapter on your 7 most important anti-Catholic objections. And among them is that kind of scent of sacramentalism, and of course the typical Protestant and anti-Catholic prejudices that exist. But I think just seeing these kind of listed, it really kind of makes us think. So thank you for that chapter.
Well, in one sense, the Catholic sacramentality was my major objection. In another sense, it was my major attraction. It was my objection because I thought it was mechanical and impersonal and like punching a machine. It doesn't depend on my state of soul, my holiness. It comes from God. The sacraments work ex operato, from the one who's working them, namely God himself. And I thought that was superstitious. On the other hand, the real presence of Christ in the sacraments, especially in the Eucharist, fascinated me, because if this was true, then Protestants are missing out on something that's even greater than mystical experience, because we're united with the whole Christ really totally present in the Eucharist, which is not even true in mystical experience. So if that Catholic doctrine of the sacraments is true, it's incredibly precious. And if it's not true, it's incredibly stupid and idolatrous. Catholics are confusing the creator of chemicals with chemicals. That's just bread and wine, and Catholics worship it as God. That's really, really stupid. So it's an either or. It's not a both and that can be mediated and compromised.
And you mentioned in the book that kind of finding the right philosophers really to kind of read and listen to and draw insights from could be a key, right?
Yes, I became a Thomist before I became a Catholic. Discovering Thomas Aquinas as probably the most brilliant philosopher who ever lived was a real discovery. And very many Protestants also agree that Aquinas is probably at least the greatest, one of the greatest, if not the greatest philosophers of all time.
So with that being said, I mean, obviously there's, the very Catholic nature of Aquinas. How do they get around that? Did they separate the two? Or it just seems to me that if you have
Protestants do tend to separate faith and reason, theology and philosophy much more than Catholics do. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, to admire Thomas as a philosopher without admiring his theology takes a bit of effort. It can be done. There are honest people who do it, and I know a lot of Protestant philosophers and theologians who agree that Thomas is the greatest philosopher of all time.
Now, I got to imagine, of course, I read it in your book, but, the parents' reaction, I send my kid off to college and he comes back Catholic. I mean, what was that like?
I'm a softie. I have pity for people I love, and I love my parents very much, and it hurt them awfully. And that was a very great difficulty. That was, up to that point, I think, the biggest suffering of my life.
Wow.
Seeing how devastated they were. But time healed it. My father eventually said to me, I certainly still don't agree with you, but I believe you're trying to follow Christ and that he's leading you, and I don't know why he led you into the Catholic Church, but I disagree with, but I deeply respect your decision. That was a real turning point for him.
Was it? Do you think it was most hard on your father, or were there other members in your family that were just as impacted, or even more so than your father?
Well, I'm an only child, and it hurt my mother too. But mothers are more flexible than fathers. Fathers tend to be more like warriors. One side wins and the other side loses. And he thought that he had really lost me at first.
Yeah, and of course there's the other side of that where you may even feel like you've somehow made a mistake, or you've been a disappointment for him at that point.
Well, I never thought I made a mistake. Once I decided, I was convinced and became more and more convinced. The roller coaster stopped, at least at baptism.
Okay.
But the relationship with my parents kept going up and down.
Very good.
One of the chapters that I know we're coming up on break in a few minutes, but I just love the heading of the chapter because it touches on something that really is like the biggest stumbling block for most Protestants, And yet, in the chapter, which is called Mariology or Mariolatry. So, are we idolizing Mary, or are we, are we Marianologists? Tell us about that chapter.
I'm still amazed. I'm still amazed at the fact that that is the major obstacle for most Protestants, because let's distinguish three phases. Number one, as a typical anti-Catholic Protestant, I thought that Catholics were really stupid in worshiping Mary and making her more important than Christ and all of that stuff. And then I realized that the true teaching about Mary that the Catholic Church has exalts Christ and exalts the Incarnation, and that it's not Jesus or Mary, but it's Jesus and Mary. And then I look back at my earlier Protestant notion, and I say, how could I have missed that? It's one of the most beautiful gems in the Catholic crown of doctrines. How could I have mistaken that diamond for an ugly stone? And I still don't understand why most Protestants find that such a terrible obstacle.
And it's a question that's been answered very well, many times, multiple times from multiple sources. Yet still, it's thrown at us, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's an
I guess it's something like, if somebody insults your father, that's bad enough, but you can fight that out. If somebody insults your mother, that goes even deeper. That's more instinctive.
Yeah. So there's a, I as Ron mentioned earlier, I entered the Catholic Church, 12 years ago. I came from nothing. I was mostly agnostic, sometimes militant atheist, and it was that way my entire life, except from very early childhood. And when I witnessed truth in the church, I basically just accepted it. I didn't understand, any of the teachings necessarily on Mary. Very, very high level overview. But it's not that I didn't accept them. I had to accept them because I knew the church was true. But I just got to the point where I knew I had to accept it, and it would come with time, and certainly it did.
And that's the natural state of progression, I think. You first trust and accept something, and then you understand it.
Yes.
It's like meeting people. You got to get to know that person first before you fully understand them. The heart leads the head there.
Yeah. And I found similarity with that too, because you said earlier, and corrected me, that you didn't think you made a mistake. You knew what you did was true. You just had to come along with accepting these things as time moved on.
And the things that were challenging and unfamiliar to me didn't suddenly all fall into place. I had to go through a lot of re-education, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Yes, I believe what the church says about state contraception, but I don't understand it. And then the more I read about it, the more I understood it. But if I hadn't, first of all, trusted the church's wisdom, I wouldn't have gotten that understanding at the end.
Dr. Peter Kreeft, our guest on Faith with Reasons, over 100 books, and many of them are probably on your shelf. We're going to continue our conversation about From Calvinist to Catholic and the book The Mystery of Joy after this break here on Faith with Reasons on Annunciation Radio.
Join millions of mothers as we pray for loved ones who have left the practice of our Catholic faith. Millions of Monicas is not a support group, but a prayer group. Join the group on the first and third Monday at St. Patrick in Bryan, first and third Wednesdays at St. Thomas More in Bowling Green, or the first and third Wednesday at Christ the King, Toledo. Learn more at millionsofmonicas.com.
My name's Father David Kidd, Director of Dawson Priestly Vocations for the Diocese of Toledo, and I'm here to pray with you today for vocations. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O God, who chose the apostles to make disciples of all nations, and who by baptism and confirmation have called us to build up your holy church, we implore you to choose among us, your children, many priests and religious who will serve you with their whole hearts, and will gladly spend their lives making you known and loved by all. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Courage, an apostolate of the Catholic Church, ministers to persons with same-sex attractions and their loved ones. They also have an outreach called Encourage, which ministers to relatives, spouses, and friends of persons with same-sex attractions. Endorsed by the Pontifical Council for the Family, our beloved John Paul II said of this ministry, "Courage is doing the work of God." Please visit the Courage website, couragerc.org, to learn more and find a Courage chapter near you.
Now, back to Faith with Reasons here on Annunciation Radio.
Hey, welcome back here. Shayne Stanfield with Ron Finn, and today we're blessed to have Dr. Peter Kreeft, professor of philosophy at Boston College. He's one of the most respected, prolific Christian authors of all time. His books cover a vast array of topics in spirituality, theology, and philosophy. Some of his books they include Doors in the Walls of the World, The Greatest Philosopher Who Ever Lived, How to Be Holy, Because God is Real, You Can Understand the Bible, and The Summa of the Summa. And obviously, you've got over 100 books, and maybe I should have asked the first half of the show, Doctor, do you ever sleep? I mean, I normally we have an author, to discuss a single book, and here we're sent two books that come out at the same time, and I just think it's remarkable that you find the time to cover so many different topics, and we're very anxious to get in. Yeah, go ahead.
That's because I'm not a great scholar who spends thousands of hours in library researching little footnotes in order to conclusively and scientifically prove points that aren't worth pointing at.
Well put.
and I take rather long trips to the bathroom.
Oh, very, very good, very good, and of course we're anxious to get into your other book here, which is currently out from Ignatius, The Mystery of Joy. But just to finish up a couple of things from the last half hour, and you mentioned something about just trying to re-educate yourself, and the first thing that really popped in my mind is I'm not sure if we really covered the topic of indoctrination. Do you find a sense of indoctrination for a Protestant theology in Protestant schools, or do they truly encourage open thought?
Well, in the version of Protestantism that I'm familiar with, the Reformed tradition, I think Protestants and Catholics are equally open to indoctrination and the importance of doctrine. In the more liberal mainline Protestant traditions, the ones much more influenced by modernity and pop psychology, you find a prejudice against indoctrination and a tendency to think of truth as something more subjective. But I did not find that among Calvinists, which is, I think, why many Calvinists become Catholic. They believe in objective truth, and they take their theology seriously.
Do you think it's do you find a greater proportion of Protestants coming from the Calvinist thought versus others?
In my experience, I do find that. I haven't got statistical confirmation of that, and I know that all roads lead to Rome, and maybe I'm just more familiar with the Reformed road. But I do know that a lot of the best Catholic theologians today are ex-Calvinists, like Scott Hahn and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as far as Protestants who may be listening to our program right now, I'm sure they're out there. Do you, based on your journey, and of course you've written about it here, once again your book From Calvinist to Catholic. Do you have any advice? Do you suggest that they follow in your same footsteps, going back to start reading Church Fathers, or do you think littler steps that might be constructive in helping them explore the Catholic Church teaching?
Well, the first step has to be honesty. That's got to be an absolute. I think at the Last Judgment, if God had to judge a dishonest theist versus an honest atheist, that the honest atheist would be closer to heaven than the dishonest theist.
Wow.
And once you're totally honest, you look at everything. You open your mind to all the evidence, including the things that are kind of scary and that you had prejudices against. Because that's a part of honesty. You realize that you're not God, you're not perfectly open-minded, and you ask him for light because you realize that the light doesn't come from you, but from him. And with regard to really controversial doctrines, like the real presence of the Eucharist, I've often told Protestants who are thinking of becoming Catholics and doubted that to perform a little experiment. I said, just go into a Catholic church sometime when it's empty and you're not being watched by anybody, and put yourself in front of the altar in the first pew and kneel down and say, Jesus, you are my Savior. I don't know whether to be a Catholic or to be a Protestant, but if these Catholics are right, that's really you there behind the appearances of bread and wine. And if that's really you, draw me there. And if it isn't, don't let me be drawn there, because that's a terrible idolatry. So I don't know whether that's true or false, but I do know that you're true, and I want to follow you. Lead me wherever you will.
Wow.
And I've received a couple of responses to that from people who actually did that and said that actually helped me to become a Catholic. Because
Wonderful.
It was honest truth that did that.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that's really what it says, is that you're open to doing just that. I mean, if you thought it was complete nonsense, you'd shut it down and you'd just refuse to do it. But it is that baby step of open honesty. One needs to admit that they don't know it all. Like you said, we're not God. And then there is a chance that we may not necessarily be wrong. We just may be ignorant to some extent, and may have understood things that you always have those distortions of the truths, those half truths, things that are passed down a lot of times from generations about what people believe the Catholic Church to be, or what they think it is, and they've really been led astray. Yeah.
We have too much faith in ourselves in one sense. We're not the standard. We're not the teachers. We're the students. My favorite sermon of all time is the shortest one I ever heard, the one that God preached to St. Catherine. He said, in effect, there's only two things you have to know. Number one, I'm God. Number two, you're not. Mm-hmm. We keep forgetting that second thing.
Yeah, there you go.
That's great. Well, I think I guess just to sum up the book, once again, from Calvinist to Catholic, your autobiography, your movement toward the Catholic faith. I guess my last question for this is, do you look at this as being educational as well, not just sharing your personal story, but there's a bit of theology here that you're attempting to explain, to the readers, or at least help them.
Definitely. That's the only reason I wrote the book.
Okay.
It's not an ordinary autobiography. It's not about me. It's about truth.
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, you're a master storyteller, but you deliver just unflinching facts that really make it easy to absorb. And when you talk about being open and honest and entering the church and learning from there, you're really seeking that fullness of truth, which leads actually to our next book, and it leads us to joy. We find that joy within us. And your other book that just came out is The Mystery of Joy, and I definitely want to get into that a little bit. Just coming off of Easter and Lent, you mentioned in the book there's joy in the cross of Christ. I mean, we find joy there. Tell us a little bit about how you came to put this book together, what your approach was, and and how we can kind of use that to foster our own feelings of joy.
I can't do that because that's not how I write a book. Mm-hmm. I don't first say, here's the need and here is how I'm going to fulfill that need. Mm-hmm. Here's the plan and here's the method of fulfilling the plan. Ideas just come to me and I put them down and organize them and write a book about them. And not meaning to be impolite, but I have to correct one of the things you just said. You called joy something within us. I think the most striking thing I learned about joy is that it's not within us. It's outside of us. It's Christ. Christ is our joy. So even if we don't feel joy, it's there. It's a gift. It's part of his life within us. We often misconstrue conscience as a feeling, and we often misunderstand love as a feeling. But most of the time, we think of joy as a feeling, and it's not essentially a feeling. Nothing wrong with feelings; they're big helps and they're wonderful. But the feeling of joy without true joy, the feeling of fake joy, that's not joy. That's a fake.
Well, yeah, point taken. Joy is real.
And it often probably leads people astray. I mean, I can see, and I believe you even talk about this at the beginning of the book. You're looking. You have a lot of people that believe. Even C.S. Lewis, he had this idea of joy, and he discovered that he was wrong on how he defined it.
Yeah, it's not the object that we desire in joy. Joy is our desiring the object that transcends joy. That's God, who is its source. Just as God transcends all beings, God transcends all joys because he's the author of it.
Now that happened to be his autobiography, "Surprised by Joy," that he writes about this. So, as far as the makeup of this book, I thought it was wonderfully done for anybody that lacks patience. Because you have, is it 95?
Like me, I have ADD. I get very impatient and bored very easily. So I like to write short books, or at least short chapters.
Yes. It's written exactly that way. It's 90, do I have it correctly? 95 chapters. And each chapter is basically just a couple of pages. So you
might call them 95 theses.
Theses, yes. So
for a reformation.
So you talked about at the beginning when you were putting this together. Of course, you just wrote these as you were accumulating these over time. They were ideas that you put down, and you initially thought that you would just put it together without any rhyme or reason, and then you thought, no, that's not going to work. And then you try to organize this and do it in an outline, and you found out that wasn't going to work. So you kind of melded the two together. Why don't you provide a little explanation behind that?
I don't know. People ask me questions about my process of thinking or my process of writing or my method of doing it, and I don't have a clue.
Kind of a devotional. You can get through this, and I love the way that you kind of explain joy as a mystery. It's bigger than we are, and you just kind of, you can't really force joy, can you? It has to be has to be fostered.
It doesn't really enter into us. We enter into it. It's bigger than us. And that's why, in order to experience it, you need humility.
So you're talking really about surrendering to deep joy.
Yeah. I'm not a joyful person by nature. I'm a puddle glum. I'm a pet.
Somebody just heard what you just explained yourself or described yourself as, and you're writing a book about joy. How can you share with them how you have entered at times into joy when it's seemingly against your nature, or at least you don't come across as being somebody that's totally filled with joy all the time?
Imagine two people. One lives in a valley, one lives on a mountain. Which appreciates the mountain more? The answer is the one who lives in the valley.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's at these moments that you're looking up or outward that's your experience.
And more important than those moments where your feeling corresponds with the truth are the many moments where your feeling does not correspond with the truth, and therefore you have to discredit either the truth or your feeling. So you're called upon to discredit your feeling, or at least to ignore it. That's what faith is.
Yes.
I still remember the first time I received the Eucharist when I was baptized at Yale. I expected something like a mystical experience, and I got exactly the opposite. There were no feelings at all. Everything was simply quiet, but I just knew without any feeling, but with absolute certainty that this was true, that this was Christ and not just bread and wine.
Faith with Reasons here on Annunciation Radio with Ron Finn and Shayne Stanfield. Our guest, Dr. Peter Kreeft, and so glad to have him on, as well. His latest book, which we're talking about now, is The Mystery of Joy. That one and the other book that just came out as well from Peter is From Calvinist to Catholic, and they're both now available from Ignatius Press at ignatius.com, and of course that's your favorite local Catholic bookstore as well. And as we talk about this mystery of joy, in your book, you really kind of make it sound pretty simple to attain joy. Is it really simple?
Yes, because God is simple. God is love, joy, and peace through and through. Those are the first three fruits of the Spirit. We complexify it when we reduce it to a human feeling. There are many different feelings that accompany love, and many different feelings that accompany joy. Some of them are not joyful feelings, and many feelings that accompany peace. We always have peace because we have God who is the God of peace. But sometimes we feel, in fact, most of the time we feel that we're in a storm, we're on waves, we're in a battle. But we have peace even when we don't feel it. And similarly, we have joy, which is God's joy, even when we don't feel it consciously.
Yeah, because we go through these ups and downs in life, as we all do. There's times of euphoria. There's times of happiness or quote joy. There's times of sickness and sadness, and but joy. I mean, having, as you say, that basis of faith, we can really kind of sustain through all of those times.
And therefore, we can even have this joy in the middle of suffering, because we realize that this suffering is a privilege. It's a splinter from Christ's cross. And Christ's cross is glorious. We put gold around it.
And you actually have a chapter here that's entitled exactly that, the joy of Christ's cross. And that might be a difficult thing for somebody to wrap their head around, because somebody could look at the crucified Christ hanging there, and he doesn't look like a joyful man.
No, but one of the epistles in the New Testament, I forget which, says that for the joy that was set before him, Christ endured the cross, making light of its shame. The joy that was set before him, I don't think that just meant the heaven that he was going to ascend to.
Yeah.
I mean, the meal that was set before him, that he was eating right now, it was indeed a terrible agony, but at the same time, it was a terrible joy, because it was his gift to the Father and his means of saving the world, all those of his children that he loved.
So getting back to just touching on the construction of this book, it is possible for somebody to pick this up and jump right to something that catches their eye in the middle of the book. But there's also a strategy to try to work your way through, even if it's just chapter by chapter from the beginning, is it not?
In a sense, yes. When I put them into an outline, it was too rigid and too logical.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept a modified version of the outline. I kept going round in a spiral, let's say,
mm-hmm.
But the spiral moved continually upward.
Nice. Well, that I guess gives me a little bit of freedom here, because I just can't wait to get in here to ask you my next question. Joy is a cat, not a dog. Maybe you can expound on that a little bit, because really anybody that's listening right now, I just get a copy of this book and just go through the first few pages of these these 95 chapters, and just reading the titles, you just start to laugh, and you're really tempted to go and start reading right then and there. So, Doctor, let's hear what you have to say about Joy being a cat and not a dog. I'm very curious.
Our family's always had both cats and dogs, and we love them both. But there's a great difference between them. You own your dog. You don't own your cat. Your cat owns you.
Yeah.
So when you call your dog, it comes. When you call your cat, it doesn't come. You come to the cat.
Yep.
That's brilliant. But no, that's exactly true.
Yeah. You don't call God down to you. God calls you up to him.
Yeah.
And that's also true of joy. Joy is, since joy is one of the fruits of the Spirit, the Catholic Church will not canonize a saint without not only heroic courage and the other virtues, but also heroic joy. And even a curmudgeon like Jerome has joy. You can see that in the jokes he makes sometimes.
Yeah. Very true. Which brings us really to another one of those topics. Joy is visible. And that's something that is so true. You really kind of spot that exuding from someone. You know what I mean? They kind of stand out.
And it's a great power of evangelism. Most people, I think, are more impressed by the joy that religious faith gives them than by anything else, by the rationality of the arguments, by the responsibility of the morality, by the practical need. Most psychiatrists are atheists, but they still recommend religion because they see that it helps people. Well, nothing is more attractive than joy. You can't argue with the smile on the face of a saint. Nobody ever won an argument with Mother Teresa.
Yeah, so very true. I was told, I was surprised. Excuse me. And when very early in my faith journey, after I had entered the church, I had a certain amount of joy about me, and I was surprised because I was told by somebody that they had watched, they were basically looking for me on Sundays just to see if they could find me because they enjoyed seeing the smile on my face, and I really wasn't aware. But you're right; it could be a marvelous evangelization tool because people know that the state that you're in, that gift that you're given, and people, I guess myself included, will radiate that from time to time.
Yeah, and it's not really under your control. It's a gift.
That's right. Yeah.
There's a fake joy, a fake smile, and most people can detect that. We've got genuine joy detectors. They're not infallible, but they work. So the joy that just happens, and you don't know why. The joy without a cause. That's the thing that draws you. It's like magnetism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as you mentioned in the book, I mean, false joy versus the self-giving, self-centered pursuit of personal pleasure, trying to choose joylessness over joy. And you mentioned a form of false joy is beige, so as contrasted with purple, right? So living purple or living beige. That's a great way to put it.
I got that image from Bishop Barron. He loves to make fun of beige Catholicism.
Oh yeah,
vague platitudes.
Yeah. Very, very good.
But it's purple, and purple is the blend of the two brightest colors, blue and red.
So, is there one? I guess again, going back to the book itself, one would necessarily should begin at the beginning of the book because that's what you're attempting to explain. First and foremost, what joy is and what joy is not, and I think that's something that people need to understand at the very beginning because, again, of the misunderstanding. One is attributing joy to a feeling. You said a joy is a person. It's not something that's within. So. Is that really the case? We really should begin at the very beginning, at least in this regard, to understand what it is and what it is not.
Yes. Many of the saints say something like, if I had to choose between the real Christ and the greatest feeling of joy or the greatest mystical experience, I would abandon the greatest mystical experience for Christ. So the feeling of joy, it's a gift, but to desire that is to desire an idol, really. That's to desire the scent of the rose instead of the rose, the smell of the food rather than the actual food.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to put it. I like that. Again, the book is called The Mystery of Joy. Dr. Peter Kreeft, our guest here on Faith with Reasons. And I'll tell you, when we look at the mystery of joy, I think that's what a lot of people miss. Joy is a mystery. I know we've talked about this a few minutes ago, but entering into that mystery and realizing what the source of that joy is can be eye-opening, and it can be jarring, I think, for people, too, because it's almost like, okay, I'm calibrated wrong. I've got my dial set in the wrong place.
Yeah. Well, that's why the first commandment is to worship God alone. All sins are forms of idolatry, putting something else in the place of God.
So there's a number of chapters.
And the most tempting idols are the best things. Nobody worships paperclips, but people do worship pleasure or happiness or even joy, which are three different levels of pretty much the same thing.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's a great way of putting it. Nobody worships paperclips. It's it's obviously the things that we find that are most what we presume are most meaningful when in fact they're not. You got a number of chapters here that you're actually naming something as a cause of joy. Beauty is a cause of joy. Mary is a cause of joy. Angels are a cause of joy. And even purgatory is a cause of joy. Mm-hmm. Because of this repetition, what would you have to say? And I know we're going to be concluding here pretty soon, but there's the reason for this repetition. Actually, I think we're finished here. I didn't look at the clock. I'm sorry.
Wow. I tell you what.
Well,
I just wanted to keep talking. So.
Yeah, go ahead. You got a couple of seconds.
Let me say just one thing about purgatory. I'm 88 years old, and I'm looking forward to a happy purgatory. I know it's going to be suffering, but it's at the same time a joy, because God is present there. He's doing it. It's like a snake shedding its old skin. Wow. It wants that suffering. It's like childbirth.
Beautiful. What a great way
suffering and great joy.
Great way to end this program. What a wonderful thought to leave us with. All right, from Calvinist to Catholic and The Mystery of Joy, go get them both at Annunciation Press or at your favorite Catholic bookstore. Dr. Peter Kreeft, thank you so much for spending some time with us here on Annunciation Radio.
You're very welcome, and God bless your work.